Because I want to be really clear, I have made a ton of mistakes along the way and will continue to make mistakes. But mistakes are the way we learn. And when we are with Spirit and we can admit that we are not perfect and we're just trying our best, the intention behind the action is what lifts us all up. And I also want to acknowledge that I'm not here ever, any day alone. This is a community that called me, that supports me, that does most of the work, and I get to show up for the fun part some days. But I want to give a shout out. A couple of them are here in the room. So board members that saw me and chose me. Alan Klein, Brock Ford, please stand. I think Elizabeth Hager is online. She couldn't be with us here in person today. For those of you who know who Darlene Castleman is also one of those board members that was there at that moment. And it's been quite a journey, as they will tell you, and I invite you to ask them after service. It was not a smooth period before I arrived or after I arrived. We went through a lot of rocky turmoil to get to the place where we could start to climb out of it. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, is as an organization, how do we see vision and create our futures? And I think there's a blueprint in it, in what we did over the last decade, what you and I and the leadership team here and the staff here and the incredible music team has done here and continues to do, that has gotten us to this point. A decade of innovation, change, and innovation and support. Constant, diligent support. Nancy Duarte is one of the only PowerPoint designers I know that has an Academy Award. She got an Academy Award for designing the PowerPoints to an Inconvenient Truth. And she wrote a book called Illuminate. And it talks about how organizations must change to survive. And it's the arc of all organizations. You start, you grow, you push up the hill, you do all the work, and then you get to the mature state where everything is happening. And there's the inflection point, folks. Because at that moment, organizations, whether they be for-profit or not-for-profit corporations, have to decide to reinvent themselves and start that arc all over, or they start the decline into death. Anyone ever heard of Olivetti typewriters? They refused to make that change, but you may have heard of IBM, who made the change from making typewriters to making personal computers. That moment of innovation happens in every organization, and it happens to us here. You could say, according to this design, and I could make a good argument for it, that you could see the decline of church because it refuses to change. It refuses to adapt to what is, and keeps stuck on the model that was a success 100 years ago, or 10 years ago, or 300 years ago, or 500 years ago. You know, we must change and adapt to the world as it is and meet people as they are and where they are so that we can fulfill the needs. Our mission is we pray, celebrate, serve, and connect to inspire and transform ourselves and our world. It says nothing about it having to be in a building. Does it? It says nothing about it having to be on Sunday morning. Our mission is we pray, serve, celebrate, and connect to transform ourselves and our world. We can do that anywhere and at all times, right? And that is purposeful, that you created. So the journey on this, Nancy Duarte further took to another level. She compared it to the hero's journey and the epic storytelling of how organizations move as we all move personally through our lives and organizations. So I invite you to look at this today in your own life, how you've reinvented and recreated yourselves over and over again, and how you're going to do it again for this next decade of your life, and how we at Unity San Francisco can do it. Okay? Ready? Oh, they're ahead of me. Sorry, Ryan, they're ahead of me. So the first is to dream. So the board and the community here 10 years ago set out a big dream. They wanted to attract a new and vibrant minister. They were sad to lose Sonia, but it was coming out of a period of much turmoil, and they held the light up for a new and innovative leader who would take them to the next level of Unity San Francisco. And in some people's mind, it was back to the glory days of Unity San Francisco. Little did they know that's not what I wanted to do. I didn't tell them that in the interview. But I listened, and I listened to what their aspirations were. And I talked to them about that church was changing and needed to change. We needed to innovate. And the next step is to leap, to take the big step and leap. And it was a step to hire me. There had only been one other out gay minister in all the 100 years that Unity San Francisco had existed, and he lasted a total of 2 years. He did move them from 9th Street, they were by the Twitter building, or the X building now, the X building, and they moved them to Bush Street. But Paul Tenalia, who actually ordained me and married JD and I, he performed the ceremony for us, was the minister here for 2 years during that period. After it was followed by Maureen, who was a dynamo, and it was very successful. But when Maureen's ministry fell apart, the church started to fall apart, and some great people stood up, took the leap, and said, we can do this, we can fix it. And Sonia was one of those, right? So there was a whole journey of leap of faith. And then there was the fight, right? The next step is to fight. And I have a coach. I've had the same coach since I started here that September 10 years ago. She still is my coach, and she coaches the board too and trains the board for us. And one day on a coaching call with her, I said, I drive them away in droves. Because there was this huge fight. There was this fight over what Unity San Francisco was going to be. There was a fight over whether we'd say pray in our mission statement. There was a fight over what we would do for hospitality. There was a fight over what service would be, who the musicians would be, how we would do it. And I took a deep breath and said, this is my vision. This is where we're going. I'd like us all to row together, because if you're in a rowboat and everyone's rowing in a different direction, you ain't going anywhere, right? So we had to pick our battles to keep the little train that could going up this hill, right? And after some of the fighting dissipated, we got to do some amazing things. One of them is this gentleman sitting right there in the white shirt, Brian Boswick. He was a real handy man. Boswick Smith, excuse me. I only gave part of his last name. Boswick Smith. They were having a fundraiser. Alan remembers this. I think he was in charge of the fundraiser. The day I arrived, there was a fundraiser already going on. It was the fall fundraiser. And I said to them, well, what's the fundraiser for? And there was no answer. I said, well, we need to have it for something. It'll be a lot more successful if it's for something. And so we set a vision that we would buy 3 screens so we could have PowerPoint in service. They didn't have PowerPoint in service. And we raised more than enough money, and Brian put every one of them up and ran all the wires and said it was weeks of time. That monitor right there is still one of them, right? 10 years later, and there's another one downstairs, and we burnt one out in the window. We burnt it out, putting it out in direct sunlight. But we still have 2 of them. And it started a new innovation where we had multimedia services, and that had never happened at Unity San Francisco before. And then the next thing, this is part of the climb, the next thing we did was add live stream, right? We were in 2013, and we still had burning CDs of our Sunday talks and selling them after service. So we luckily and blissfully had a beautiful gift of a large estate came to us, And we put it towards creating the light. Saying, these cameras you see filming me right now are the same cameras we bought back then to make this happen and move us online and into the 21st century. Those were part of the climbs. Then we hired Reverend Deanne Weir-Morency, who came in and was the associate minister with us and expanded our horizons and expanded our possibilities. Misa showed up first to be guest singers, and then she just said, well, what can I do to serve? And before we knew it, we had this full-blown music program, which is the envy of every church in Unity. Truly. I get emails from my colleagues at Unity World Headquarters going, oh my God, right? Your music program is off the charts. I was like, yes, it is. And we, Lisa and I, worked very hard and very purposefully at it. Very, very much setting our goals and our agenda, know where we were going and how we would get there. And then when it didn't work like we thought it would, we'd reinvent it and come back again and do it another way. Never giving up on the goal, but giving up on our own flawed ideas of how it would work, right? And we keep doing that to this day. And then it gets to the place of arrive. Now, I think there's actually two of these arcs in our story over the last decade. I think at that moment when we were starting to hum with our live stream and with the people coming to our services and our music department and all the things that were happening, we made an epic decision to see if the place we were having services was the right place for us. And the board came together and we had it. I remember this very intense meeting where the board says, what are we looking for in a new building? What are we looking for? And one by one, Karen Epps went around and said, what are you looking for? And we named everything we wanted. We wanted it more accessible to BART and to public transportation. We wanted it more open. We wanted more light. We wanted more space to grow. We wanted all these things. And we said, so can we get those things, if we stay here at Bush Street? And everyone on the board said no. You were there at that meeting, weren't you, Elaine? No, not that meeting? She came after that. We can't stay. So we knew at that moment that we were all going to row together and we were going to explore moving. And we took 2 years. 2 years of reinventing ourselves, telling the community what we were looking at, what the possibilities are, what we could get for our building, what was going on, and we waited through the 2 years, till at one point someone said, can we just vote already? Right? Because we gave all the information we could, because we knew that people were attached to the old space. People don't like change as much as even here in Unity we'd say, oh yes, change is the only constant in the world. And then you take something away from them and they're like, oh, change. Ken, he changes things. Yeah? So we found this building. We did 2, if not 3 tours of it with the whole community where we walked through. And if in case you haven't noticed, I'm a kind of a visionary kind of guy. I'm a big picture kind of guy, not a detailed kind of guy, big picture. I could see what this building had. I could see the bones. People walked through and went, oh my God, this is horrible. And people who did, it was, right? It was pretty bad. So people said, do we have to keep the bare bulbs? It's like, no, we can get new chandeliers. We can get new light fixtures. We can get all those things. And we slowly but surely moved in. And it was like another leap. It was a leap of faith. 4 years ago now, 4 years ago, buses pulled up on our 100th anniversary from our old space to our new space, and we did our first service in this building. The staff at the time, I thought we should move on our anniversary, move to this building, surprise everyone with the move, and then never go. The staff told me, no, people are going to need to go back to Bush Street, and they're going to want to, say goodbye to Bush Street, and we're going to go back. And we came here, we did service here, and everybody said, do we have to go back to Bush Street? And I was like, no, we don't have to go back to Bush Street. And so we didn't. We never went back, except we went back to clean up all the work Brian had done. We had to take all out, all that effort and that work. And then we did a ceremony where we said goodbye, lit candles, chanted a cappella chants, and said goodbye to the home we had had for 25 years so that we could move on. And we have stepped up. Do you know that right now we have as many people watching us online simultaneously as we have in the room? That's the power of our live stream. By the end of next week, over 100 people will have watched us on live stream, plus another 25 to 35 who watch just the talk, as we excerpt the talk, and another 20 to 30 who listen to it as a podcast. 1,000 people last year listened to our Sunday talks just as a podcast. All we do is take the audio out, put it on a podcast. It's on our website. If you've never done it, I invite you to put me in your ear during the week. And so that's how we have come in another arch, that fight, that jump, and that fight to get here in the building. And I had a fight with the city. That was part of the fights about historical historical rules. Right where I'm standing right now used to be a gigantic pipe organ. Those of you who hated it remember it well, because it was huge and looming right here. And the city wanted us to keep it, and so much so, and they in fact invited me to just wall it off and to keep it back there, entombed. And I said, we need the space. And we won that battle. The organ actually was taken by a person who runs a music festival in Ohio. It was built in Indiana, so it went back to the Midwest. And it runs now in a music festival in Ohio. So it's living somewhere else where someone's using it, right? And we get this glorious space to have service in. That's been part of the fight and part of the climb. We went through COVID in this building right after we moved in. We had to shut down. We used what we could in that time, since we didn't have permits and the city pretty much shut down too, to fix up what we could without permits and move this building forward. And then that's all changed, and we're back. COVID is still with us, but we're back in a new way, in a new understanding. So we've arrived. We've arrived once again, where we have 120 to 150 people who watch us on Sunday, who participate. And for those who say you can't monetize live stream, not true. Thank you to everybody who watches us online, who tithes to us, who gives to us. And a portion of our income, of our good, comes from people who have never set foot in this building. They are just as much a part of Unity San Francisco as all of us. And then there's the people who aren't with us physically anymore. The people who have transitioned and are with us only in spirit. And I would be remiss if I didn't give my thanks and acknowledgement to them, because they have made such a huge difference. So I'm just giving you a warning. Oh, okay. So first is Barbara Renfro. Barbara Renfro was the woman who left us a quarter of her estate. It was a magnificent gift. Tom Gallegos, longtime supporter, many of you know he was on many of the trips. He was a local fireman. When we did his funeral here, they pulled up a city fire truck, pulled up in front, and all the firemen came in for the memorial service. Edgar Harris was one of our singers and was sang here and shared his beautiful voice. Dorothy Ramey was one of the board members and one of the members who really held it together through the collapse of the Maureen years, when Unity Worldwide Ministries was called in to help right the ship around here. Ben Bacot, the bass of the bay, right? He was one of our singers as well. And oh my God, Ben would come and go to church. He would just go to church. It was fabulous. We miss Ben. Vic Nakarar, Mike's partner, would sit with Mike, and the joy. Jerry Huber, Hawaiian Jerry. Hawaiian Jerry he sang in the choir. Jerry would massage you if you stood still for a second. Several different boards, I have told, had different rules for how to manage Jerry. They had people who would follow him through the community to keep him from putting his hands on people who didn't want to be massaged. And his spirit lives with us. Our own Errol Roloffs. Love you, Errol. Karen Ray. Karen came to us in the last 6 years, and left way too early. Bernard Menotti. Bernard came to us from the CSL church when it closed, and was a great, great community member. Harriet was the sweetest woman I'd ever met. I met her at Unity Palo Alto. She followed me to Unity of Fremont when I was at Unity of Fremont, and then she followed up. She'd drag her daughter and her son-in-law. She'd drag them to service on Sunday. Get up! Harriet passed away this year. Mary Suda came to us first at Bush Street and then here, and passed away last year. Susan Mosk, I never met, but she was a member here for 20 years, a member of the board, and moved away and left us a legacy gift this year. Another large gift came to us for people we don't even know. When I say to you that your good is coming to you from sources you cannot even imagine, it's true. It's true if you're open to it and understanding that what you put out in the world cannot help but come back to you. And then our dear Wesley, just in June, passed away. Those souls are still here with us. Their memories, their input, their gifts, all resonate with us to this day. So when I talked to you a couple of weeks ago about leaving your legacy, that's what I'm talking about. You leave a legacy wherever you go, and I want you to make it consciously and purposefully. Which leads us to the next decade. Where do we go from here? Right? How do we hold up that torch? How do we climb to the top of the hill and then to the top of the ladder and look over the horizon and see what's happening? See what's happening in the world and in spiritual communities and where we need to go. How we need to reinvent ourselves. What do we need to let go of? What do we need to adapt as processes and practices? And what do we need to bring back from the past so that we can recreate ourselves and start the journey again, to take the leap and recreate Unity San Francisco for the next decade? I'm in. I'm not going anywhere. This is my spiritual home. This is my community as long as you want me. So if we want to create for a new decade, let's brainstorm, let's talk about it, let's do it, let's roll up our sleeves and create an amazing community for the next 10 years.